Although extreme levels of salt in our diet can lead to high blood pressure and heart disease, the body needs salt in moderation to power the nerve signals for muscles. Almost every recipe calls for at least a little bit of salt to enhance the flavor of the food. And when roads ice over, salt is used to de-ice them. And for all that, you can still pick up a 1.5 pound container of it at the grocery store for less than $1. But it wasn't always that way. Salt was considered so valuable in ancient times that it was sometimes traded ounce for ounce with gold. Taxes on salt fueled revolutions and influenced wars. Soldiers of the Roman Empire were sometimes paid in salt, hence the word salary. Salt may have been common and ordinary, but it proved to be valuable because of its many different uses, some that are familiar to us and others not so much. Jesus references one of those not so familiar uses of salt in this morning's text. So unfamiliar, in fact, that for many people the text seems to make no sense at all. Looking out over the crowds of common, ordinary people plagued with poverty and sickness, he likened them to salt of all things, calling them the salt of the earth. Then he goes on to talk about salt losing its taste or its saltiness, which makes absolutely no sense to most folks. How can salt lose its saltiness even if it sits on the shelf for years? Well, here's some information that might help you understand the text better. First, the Greek word for earth that Matthew uses when Jesus said salt of the earth is drawn from a Hebrew word that elsewhere in the Bible means not just the earth, but literally the earthen oven. You see, in Jesus' day, each village had an outdoor earthen oven that the villagers shared. Secondly, the common fuel for the oven was camel or donkey dung because it was more plentiful than wood. One of the duties each young girl had to learn was to collect the dung, mix salt in it, and mold it into patties to be left in the sun to dry. A slab of salt was placed at the base of the earthen oven, and upon it the salted dung patty. You see, salt would act as a catalyst, helping the dung to burn. But eventually the salt slab loses its catalytic ability and becomes useless. And so this morning's text makes more sense with this background information, so that maybe a more accurate rendering of it would be, you are the salt of the earthen oven, but if salt has lost its saltiness, that is, its ability to catalyze, how can it be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. Jesus was telling his listeners, you are the salt of the earthen oven. Not you will be, not you might become if you behave correctly, but you already are salt. You may be common and ordinary, but you're incredibly valuable. Before he began to instruct his listeners with the rest of what is known as the Sermon on the Mount, before telling them what they should and should not do, he tells them who they are. They are valuable members of God's kingdom. For many of us here today, this matters because we may have been shamed over how we present our bodies, who we love, and how we live out our lives. We've been told to tone it down, and we felt as if we had to prove our goodness and to earn our belonging. But Jesus looks at us and says, we are valuable. Not because we are wealthy, important, or powerful, but because of who we are at our core. You may have received covert messages or been told outright to not make a scene, to not be visible, or to not bring your whole self into the circle. But Jesus contradicts that with this morning's text, saying, instead, you are necessary for the world's healing. You are worthy and valuable, not in spite of who you are, but because of who you are. You are the salt of the earthen oven. It's a powerful metaphor, this image of salt as catalyst that starts a fire burning, an image which blends smoothly into Jesus' next metaphor of light for the world. We are not only the catalyst for the fire, but we are the fire itself which provides light. Light guides us in the darkness, and it warms us when we're cold, but it also exposes things that are hidden in the darkness. Light reveals the places where justice work still needs to take place. When we live authentically, our light shines forth into a world that is starving for hope. But being a light can be risky business. On the one hand, it exposes inequity and injustice, but on the other hand, a light shining in darkness becomes a target. It's a target for those who are in power and want to remain in power. Yet still, Jesus says, don't hide it. But hear me when I say, I don't think Jesus is saying to come out before you're ready. Blending in can keep us alive, and silence can keep us safe. There are seasons when hiding is a holy act. The infant Moses was hidden in a basket that was placed in the river to preserve his life. And the baby Jesus was hidden from King Herod's murderous plot when he became a refugee in the land of Egypt. But hiding is not the same as disappearing. God does not ask us to erase ourselves to be faithful. When Jesus says to let your light shine before others, it's an invitation to trust that your life, as it truly is, helps others find their way. Often the most powerful witness is simply surviving with tenderness, loving with honesty, and refusing shame. So this morning's text is a reminder of who we are. We may be as common as salt or light, but we are valuable. In a world that sometimes feels overwhelmingly cruel, we are the salt that ignites the flame of compassion and love. In a world where prejudice and abuse hide beneath the cover of darkness, if we let our light shine, we give testimony to the beauty of God's creation. So you be you, and I'll be me. And together, when we do, maybe we can offer a bit of hope for the world. Maybe we can make it a better place in which to live. Amen.